Are there any questions or things you want to go over that we've talked about before? I already mentioned to people, I've been working on a hands-on exercise thing. I'm working on a project that I'll have on GitHub that people can pull down and then run and have some failing tests and sort of work through getting them to pass. I've just had some challenges. If I took it from somebody else, it's this whole template process, and I've got a couple of them in there, but some of the steps are failing now after I stripped out some of their code. So I'm trying to get all that troubleshooted and in place, and then get some more tests there for everybody. But should have something in place by next week at least that we can use for that, and hopefully just build on above to keep getting more and more into that. I was hoping to use REPL.it, but they don't really have a good React environment for testing React stuff, so I don't think it makes sense to try and leverage that and fight trying to get that to work with what we need. All right. If there's no questions on anything, I don't have any slides for today. Today's gonna be very hands-on. I want everybody, if you haven't already, start up your Cloud9, at least get your dashboard up. And then what I'd like for you to do is create a new workspace. And you can name it whatever you want, but base it off of the blank template in Cloud9. Yes.
For people that were in the JavaScript class, we've already done that.
Mm-hmm.
Do we do a new one? Do you know what we did?
I don't know what your workspace looked like before, so you could use the same one if you want. The difference will be we're going to, if you do that, what I'll encourage you to do is work inside of a folder. So create a separate folder and do all of your work from in there.
No, in the JavaScript class, we created a new space for the React class.
Oh, okay. So you created a separate space for the React class work.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to know if you knew.
No, I didn't know that you guys had done that.
Okay.
So yeah, it does. I mean, it'll probably be about the same either way, whether you work out of that one, which will be fine. You'll just be working out of that folder. Or you do this. One thing that we are going to do, once you get set up, I'll go ahead and just paste this in, is I want to update to the latest version of Node and NPM. And so I'm putting this in Slack right now.
So you want to use a blank workspace?
Blank workspace would be best so that you don't have any clutter there and you're not going to get like confused, because we're going to create, use Create React App to create something from scratch. We don't want anything else in the way. It does have Node and NPM that you need. And then this command it worked for me. You may get an error just because there's not like a package JSON file, but this command should update your Node version and then NPM versions as well. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna bookmark this so I have it as a reference and I can get rid of it. But today, who here is, I know some people who've worked in other languages. Who here has ever heard of or is familiar with like a package manager for a programming language? I know some people are. Some people work with Gem, or have you worked with NPM before or anything like that?
Errors.
Errors. That's when you ran the NVM command, you got a couple errors?
Yeah.
They should be pretty much the same ones I saw, which are just that there wasn't a package JSON file.
Yeah.
That's fine. Those errors are not a concern.
I like the capital letters in red with the exclamation point.
Yeah.
seriously.
You need to be really scared, but really you don't. Yeah, people can be running these commands while we're going over this initial stuff as well. And then I'll just make sure we're not too far along before we move to the next step. So anybody like used a package manager at all? You've used at least Gem, right? This is
Or, it's considered the Ruby one.
Ruby Gems or whatever.
RVM? No.
It's just Gem. I don't know what it's called. Ruby Gems, I think is just what it is, but I can't remember the name of the tool that you use a lot of times underneath. So I find this an interesting topic. It's a little hard for people who haven't done other coding to wrap their head around at first. But the idea is, and I just haven't found a good way to ever present this that makes it clear at first. Talked a lot about being able to reuse code and how abstraction is important. And we're used to creating functions or classes for our class. Well, packages are just sort of a higher level version of this where you can reuse code from somebody else. So at the most basic level, it's grabbing some bit of code that somebody else has created and pulling it into your app to leverage. And that can come from the small to something huge. So I'm gonna play around with this just a tiny bit and go grab something really small to leverage so that you guys can sort of see what I'm talking about. Let me see if I can find a place to do this. I think they actually have a sandbox that might work for me here.
Is it okay to install Bundler?
Is it okay to install Bundler? You can. We're not going to be using that because we're going to be using NPM
Oh, okay.
for all of our packages because that's the most common JavaScript package manager. But
Just if I have it.
let me see here. Here we go. I'm just going to hop onto a different site real fast. So I'm going to pull down, like, try and give some examples, hands-on. Let me see if I can get something really tiny. So I'm gonna pull in a very tiny package from somebody else. I'm gonna pull in this left pad package. And I think REPL.it will let me just pull in pretty much anything. So let me see if this works. All right, so I'm sort of shortcutting what's going on here just to show you working with packages first, and then we'll look at a little bit more of how to use NPM. But the idea is if I have access to this bit of code, left pad, we can go look at what left pad does, and here's some of the documentation. So we can start reading what we get from it. And really all it says is left pad foo 5. So it looks like what it takes is a string and then a number. So let's step back here and play with it for a minute. Is this large enough for people to see? Do I need to zoom in? I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Better? So let's just like log something. Console.log left pad hello, and let's give it a number of like 10. And let's see what happens when I run this. All right. Looks like we got hello way over here sort of printed out, but we also had some stuff over here. This looks like maybe white space. Yeah, it's just adding, so let's try some more, right? See if we can figure this out real fast. Let's try hello and 1. And if we run this, what we'll see is we have hello here with, no. And let's try 2 just to get a feel for what's going on maybe. it might be that, hold on. I think it's doing something a little quirky here. I think it's only padding if your string is smaller than that. So it's making your string that large. So let me do it. Let me change these to 6 and 7. And what we can see is it made our string 6 characters long by padding with spaces, and here it added a couple spaces to make it 7 characters long and just gave us back a string that long. And we can actually say what to pad with as well if we want by giving it a third argument. So we could say like A, and we can see it fill in those spaces, right? So this is just about the tiniest package that we could get. It's just one tiny little function.
How do you know you could add that third parameter?
I was familiar with it, but I looked at the documentation here, and you can see 1, 2, 3. So they're sort of showing you, and then they'll have some explanation here. Note the third argument should be a single character. So I mean, really, you sort of learn that stuff by reading the documentation for a lot of things. That's something that you have to get used to when you start to pull in other packages, is you spend a lot of time reading how that stuff works. And that's something that's going to be part of the homework here, is to find a package that's interesting and come back and talk about it. And it doesn't even have to be something that you actually implement, use necessarily. But I'm going to encourage people to hop on NPM and search around, spend time on there looking at packages and try and find something fun and interesting. Now, just to give you a feel for how, I think they've got some documentation on here. Maybe it might have hidden it all, but they used to show how many packages existed on here. Let's look at registry status. This might have some of it. Oh, they may not have it. Let me see if I can do something here. NPM. Oh, this is for specific packages. I know they used to list this right on their site, but they might not.
What are you looking for?
I was just looking for just some numbers, right? To give people a scale of how much stuff is out there. So yeah, they play with it doesn't, a lot of people think it stands for Node Package Manager, and so they vary their name all the time just to play with that. But okay, this is not the easiest to read, but here we see NPM, and NPM being the largest package manager by far in the world, has something like not quite, can't even do that, like 700,000 modules on it, it looks like. And it's growing by like 503 a day. So there are tons out there and millions of downloads per day of people using this. But what I'm trying to get at here, and again, it's sort of, like I said, it's sort of hard to understand when you first encounter it, because you've been writing functions, you've been writing these small, little, tiny programs. There's this huge world of other code that people have written that's going to be available to you that you can leverage in your program in different ways. So I'm starting with something tiny. We've got this tiny little left pad one, and we could build that into an app individually as well, using, if we had a little applicate, like I pulled it in a little bit cheating here in a sort of easy way by pulling it in the way I was able to here. But if we were trying to create a project that used it, and needed to pull it in. I'll show you guys how to do some of that in just a little while.
You can install it like you would do gem, right? Gem install.
Yeah,
Blah, 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 but it'd be in.
It's very similar. Yep. That's pretty much exactly it. And so you can even see the documentation. Everyone documents how to do it, like npm install leftpad. But you need to have a project first. And so we're gonna, since we've been working just on individual files in a sandbox, the first thing we're gonna do is spin up a project, and we're sort of gonna bootstrap that using npm as well. And then bootstrap a React project, and then we'll start adding stuff in and looking at it. Before we get there, I wanna show like the different levels in scale. So this is tiny, one little function that we could use. So let's try and look at something that's a little larger that you can get from npm. Oh, by the way, in case you were wondering, this is also how you typically install React when you're working with stuff, is you go and pull React down as a package. It's sort of where everything will usually come from. So let's look at React. It says that React was downloaded 2 million times in the last week. Pretty active use. But let's go see, what's a good example of a much larger one? Here's a good one. Material.io. This is, oh wait, Material UI. This is a package. So what this is that's crazy. There's a lot of different ones up here as opposed to the one I was looking for. Maybe I need a dash there. Look at all these other ones. I just want Material UI. It's got to be the most popular one out of these. All right, sort by popularity. I don't know. It did down here. So weird.
It must be super popular.
It is. It's just a little weird that I'm not getting it as the top result. I'm getting their docs. So maybe they've split stuff up. I'm going to go to their website instead. And just double check and see if installing it is the same. Oh, it's Material UI core, it looks like. So we can go here and start looking. This is a website documenting some of this stuff for this Material UI package, right? This is another package in the same way. So let's look at what this includes. This includes style stuff. This includes layout. This includes all sorts of components. So it includes like an app bar component that can be pulled into your app, avatar, backdrop, badge, bottom navigation, buttons. We've got demos of all of these. So like an app bar, all different types of buttons, expansion panels, menus, lists, right. It's a huge package with tons of stuff in it, right? But it gets installed the same way that you install that tiny little left pad. So what I'm getting at here is that this pulling down packages, there's not like one size, one thing. It's just a place where you can go leverage somebody else's code. And that may be bundled up in a lot of different ways. It may be, some people subscribe to the theory of really tiny, focused, self-contained things like LeftPad. And some people, or in some cases, it makes sense to have something large like this Material UI that you pull down because it's nice to have a cohesive thing for all of your UI instead of having to pull in individual pieces or something. Oh yeah, yep. And we'll start looking at that a little bit, but if we go and looked at, so let's look at this Material UI bit, because we're going to talk a little bit about how some of this stuff works. But the key part here for, and you guys don't need to know all of the details of this just yet, but we'll dig into it. This one's a very complicated file. The key thing is this package JSON file. And let's look at a much simpler example than that. So what I want to do is step back over. If you have your Cloud9 workspace up, did people run that command to upgrade their Node and NPM versions? I posted it in Slack. Here it is on my screen too. If you haven't run that command, go ahead and run it. And then we're going to be doing this live, so any problems that I have, hopefully you guys will have too. That's why I'm working out of the same Cloud9 environment today. I haven't gone through these steps yet, so I hope that there aren't any big issues that crop up as I'm working through this.
Can you take a look at this? People already installed that.
Yep.
Oh,
So you definitely have a React project running. A couple React projects. So, no, this is okay. You started with a Node project. And this is your React. So that's create React app. Yeah, you already spun one up, you can create React app. So that's fine to use the base. You can work out of this folder, but you need to be in that my app folder or whatever. You're doing. This is a little weird. Oh, you're in the wrong. Yeah, we need to get a. You have a cell
maybe I should just start
phone. And we could clean it up, but yeah, you don't have a console. There's a console. Yeah.
Your mic is on the browser.
All right, cool. Now you just did CD into the my app folder, I think, or you may have to go into React underscore basics and in my app.
Call my directory.
PWD. No problem.
The good thing is that it usually has a pop-up talking about that blues.
And if you didn't know there's tab completion. So if you start typing something, like here, I'm gonna show you. Oh, you already did it. If you start typing that again, CD and then like React, so you can hit tab, and if it's a unique name, like that's weird, you can't see the React basics folder. Maybe that's just what this is called. Try my app. Okay, so that must be the name of that workspace. So that should be, you're already sort of a step ahead. But, all right, has everyone at least run this NVM step now?
Yeah, I can't.
You can't sign in?
It won't let me. Yeah. I'll click something, nothing. Like I'll click little thing, so I can like type, but nothing will just type.
All righty then. It's weird. Is it your laptop or is it?
Seriously.
I don't know.
Well, the thing that I'm noticing, usually I get this blue like box on mine, like, and it's been like that for months. Every time you log in, it has exciting news, which isn't exciting anymore. But I thought it was weird, it doesn't come up there.
Okay. Can
Is
you?
that maybe it's
you
delayed because it's waiting for that to pop?
I don't know.
Click everything. Outside of that one word.
Try it again. Yeah, I think you're struggling with. I think you're struggling with your little laptop having some issues too.
Like everything aside from like these three will work. Like, all this will work, this will work. But if there's two more, I don't know why.
Are you? Something, I don't know what's going on because it's skipping over them in tab completion too. So they're like, I would have to sit down and troubleshoot what's going on in your Chrome instance because it's like Chrome isn't seeing those as valid elements or something. Something is really wonky there.
It does not want to be bothered.
Yes.
I have to go from here, right?
Sure, yeah. you could have, I mean, if you already had a workspace, that's fine too. The best one to use is just use the blank. Just right here.
Oh,
So that you don't have any extra stuff, and then you'll need to give it a name at the top of, like, I just called mine React class, but whatever. Yeah. And it'll probably take a little while until you click that. You might need to click it again.
should have. Then after that, I'll run this command.
You already have. Oh, you can only have lowercase letters instead. So I think you have to get rid of the uppercase R.
Do you have another browser?
I just have comments already.
You have to try Safari.
Jeez.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and start moving forward a little bit, but the next step, if you haven't already done it in your workspace, is going to be, you should have NPM, and like I checked the NPM version, you can see it up here where I did npm-v, just to see if I don't think this, oh, it did install npx, awesome. So if this worked for you, we can use npx, which is gonna make stuff nicer. So then we can use npx, which will mean that we don't have to install create React app. What that's going to do is actually pull down a package from that npm repository and let us run it without doing an install. It's working?
Yeah, now it is.
All right. So npx create React app, and then let's give it a name to start with, right? I'll call it my app. So what we're doing here is npx is a tool like npm. It comes within the newer versions of npm. Then we're telling it, go get the create React app package. And what that create React app package lets us do is create, sort of bootstrap up a React application. So it saves us from having to do a lot of manual work to start up creating a React application.
Like Rails.
It's like Rails new, yeah. Exactly. And so this will probably take a while. Yes.
What's going on when your computer is doing exactly what you did. It's setting conflict with the node modules and the package JSON that we did on the last class. I just created it.
Let me go check.
Try using a new. Oh, it's because I already have one.
Because you already have one called My App. And I'll bet you that that's fine. So you're probably already done with this step. And what you can do is just, well, you could delete it, but you could also just go into that folder and work out of it. I think you'd be fine working. Like this is unless you change some stuff in here, this is probably a perfectly fine starting point for you. Yeah, it looks like everything will be fine. So you can just navigate to that directory, like CD into it, and then you'll be ready for the next step from there. So anyone who already has that installed, go ahead and try this, this npm start command. But you need to go into your My App folder, so CD My App. And from in there, try npm start. So this is where it gets a little confusing when we talk about npm. npm is sort of two different things. npm is a command line utility that lets you work with, pull down packages, and do a little bit of working with stuff. And it's also this massive, repository out here with 600,000 plus packages that you can pull down and use. So that's why it's not completely cut and dry, right? This is the npm repository, and then the npm command line tool is this other one that we're using. So if you actually look at the docs, they'll have a lot of documentation on it, like what is NPM? It's the world's largest software registry with approximately 3 billion downloads per week. And it consists of, well, the website, which is how you look at the registry itself, which is where everything's being stored, and this command line utility that we're using right now. Now, the way the NPM command line utility works, do I make this stuff larger too? I can zoom in on all of this, I believe. Oh, hold on. All right, I don't know if I can. The way this,
Did you create it? Which one you did? You did the one from the Slack. So after that, you can check the version.
all right, so who's been able to run NPM start? Yeah? Has anybody, so once you've done that, you'll have a link here to a local host's web server. So what that's actually doing is running a web server for you. And you can click that link and choose open. Or you can choose open in browser or open in preview. Either one works. Open in preview will open it right here. But it may not, I guess maybe it won't work. That's weird. But open in browser should open another window with it. And it might give you like a warning or something, but then you should be able to see this. So once you've gotten to this page, if you're able to get there, go ahead and put your hand up just so I can see people who have gotten the Welcome React bit up and running.
Dash app, right? And then space, and then.
All right.
My app.
How are we doing? You there yet?
Yeah,
Awesome.
she's, they have, I think, Eloa, she has a question.
Check if you have
Okay.
NPX.
I'll go ahead and take a look on Slack. Thanks for letting me know. Whoa.
I can't even get it.
You can't get into Cloud9 either?
I didn't have an account, so I keep trying to complete the setup.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, did you?
Something is wrong with sound.
MVM install from the Slack? But it didn't.
Can other people who are listening online hear me? Romina says she can't hear me.
Yeah, try it, copy it again. Did you get both lines? It should be 2 lines. Oh, no, maybe it's not.
All right.
Oh.
It's fine. Okay, yeah, there's nothing else. And then-
Okay, it looks like what's going on for the people online is some of you obviously had already run this upgrade or you were running somehow a newer version. I don't know how if you didn't run this. And so that's great. Like I was down on like a very down level version of Node and I kept trying to create new instances today to get that working, but it was not. So if you've been able to get NPM start working and you're seeing this Welcome to React page and you're remote, go ahead and just post something here or here post something on Slack if you've been able to get it working so that I can know that you're at that point. I want most of us to be there before I move on, although I know a few people may have other issues that are holding them up.
Yeah.
What's that?
My thing's not upgrading, I'm beyond. My thing is not upgrading,
I'm not sure why.
but it says right here, 8.0 is already installed. I'm very confused.
Isn't command NPM, like NPM, I think she's asking,
Yeah.
he said NPM is a command line utility.
I think she's asking for the NP.
Oh, you know what's going on? You've got
React
the
app.
tick marks.
Oh.
I don't know if that was it,
No.
but she said the last one.
Just on here that.
The tick marks were just there so that it looks like it's code in Slack.
Right.
If you put tick marks around something in a Slack post, it's code.
Oh.
So did you?
And it formats it.
Okay.
Just from the
Well,
start.
then that's good. I'll have it down later. For the crazy.
There you go. That's the error I expect you to see. All right. So you still can't get into.
Yeah, I've been trying to sign up for the, I guess, the Amazon account.
Oh,
but every
jeez,
time I-
they've got a new setup now. Hold on.
I don't know, I can just like. take
Okay, if
notes
you
and
can
sign up
message me,
later.
on Slack, because we should be able to add you to our Code the Dream setup, which will auto create, I think, an account for you, I believe under the old system. We'll double check. Ever since they got bought by Amazon, they've been changing their policies around, and it's hard to tell. Yeah, it's hard to tell where they're at, because I think they're trying to move over, get rid of some of the free stuff. I don't know, so we'll find out. We may end up having to shift off to something different in the future. Yeah, if you shoot me a message, I'll get you added up with an account, assuming I can do that, and then hopefully that'll let you work. All right. Anybody not have this working still? Who's actively trying to get there? All right. Sounds like most people have gotten this stuff up and running. So let's take a minute and look at what happened with this Create React app and some of these files. I'm not going to dig into it too much, but we're going to look at the package.json file in particular, because this is a pretty basic version of this file. So it's nice to see one that's much simpler than the one that we were just looking at from Material UI. So this is sort of your, if you were thinking, if you wanted to look at something, let's use an example. I've got Chrome open here, right? So if I do Chrome and I go like about Google Chrome, and you get to see some information about it, right? Like here's information about Chrome. Or let me find another example that isn't the same. I think maybe Slack will give me a little pop. You see this little pop up here? It's like Slack, this is version 3.05. Here's some other information about it. Well, that's what a lot of these first bits are in this package.json. This is the sort of information of what your application is, right? So you see your name should be whatever you called your folder. I called it my app, so it's my app. It's got a version number in there. When you start developing software, you give stuff version numbers so that you can know when it's updated and people can see, oh, I've got an old version, I've got a new version, etc. There is an extension cable we can move back if you need it from right here. I said we have an extension cable if you need it that might help you out too. Yeah. All right.
There's a plug here.
The other things that are worth knowing about in here that come from that NPM cares about are dependencies. And if you look here, you might begin to guess what this does if you guys haven't talked about it at all. What would you think this dependencies section does for this? So this is a way to know what packages, each one of these are a package from the NPM repository. And this is a list of them along with the version that your project needs. So if we were to look, once you've got this up and running, one of the things that happens when you're starting something up like this, I'm going to delete this folder real fast and then create it again, is this node modules folder gets created. So let me shut down my server, delete this node modules folder. What?
How did we start
npm start if you're in the, yeah, that should be all you need. So I just deleted this node modules folder and I'm gonna run npm install. And npm install will look at this package JSON file, look at any dependencies, or there's also another key, because this is just a JSON file. These are just JavaScript keys and values. But it'll just look for another key that's called dev dependencies as well and install anything from either one of those. And what you'll see right now is it just added a whole bunch of packages and this node modules folder came back. That's what was going on. Now, if we look in this node modules folder, oh my gosh, that doesn't look like the 3 dependencies that we've got listed. That looks like, yeah, that 300. What's going on? Any guesses?
Brought in all the files that go with those different, they're not gems, they're
These are other packages. Yeah, it brought in other modules. So let's look through here. Let's guess and say, if it says React, then I'm guessing that I'm gonna have a React folder here somewhere, right? All right, all right.
Should we install?
Oh, here we go. Install ran automatically for you. I'm just showing you, when you ran npm start, it ran install in the background. I'm just showing you running install directly. If we go in this React folder and look at its package JSON, it's got a lot more going on in it. But one of the things it will have, most likely, what?
It has additional.
It has additional dependencies itself. There we go. So what that means is when it installed, when we said we depend on React, npm went and looked inside of there, looked at all its dependencies and made sure those had to be installed. And then inside of each one of these to make those dependencies were installed, and on and on and on, all the way down. Right. And so we could look at the other ones too, right? React DOM, all right, well, that's another one of our top levels. And that has its own list of dependencies that it needed to install as well. The carrots? No, I don't think there's any dumb questions when you're looking at this stuff. I think that's a great question. So when it comes to versions, there's a lot of different ways in npm to specify what version of a package you depend on. Let me see if I can find if it notes here. There should be a good note here on how to do. So this is. Let me see here. This is a way to specify. It's not really Semver. Yeah, this is a way to specify ranges. I'm trying to look for. It doesn't do this as much anymore, but they'll have a lot of documentation in here if we look at working with package JSON stuff. Let me try and find it. Specifying dependencies. Here we go. They call it Semver, but it's not exactly. There's a lot more to it. But yeah, there's several different ways to specify what dependencies you allow. So like this little caret in front, what that means is I'm willing to accept version 1.0.4 or 1.0.5 or 1.0.6, but not 1.1. That's too much of a change. And so there's what's known as semantic versioning, and what that is supposed to mean here generally means that if you increment the first digit of a version number, that means you had a breaking change in your code. So it means that somebody may not be able to just switch to that version and keep and work. They may have to change something in their code to make that work. when you increment the second, like middle digit, that's supposed to be like a minor version number. So maybe you added new features, new functionality to your package, but you shouldn't have broken anything that was already there. And then that last digit is supposed to be like bug fixes or very, very tiny things, right? So by default, semantic versioning stuff, it's not going to let you update the major one automatically, because that would very likely break your code. Because if you did an npm install later and there's a newer version of that package available, it'll install that instead of the one that's listed. And if it's a major version, that could break your code. But it might let you specify, okay, I accept minor release changes or just patch release changes. And so that means, oh, I guess with this, never mind, this said minor, right? So this would allow 1.1, but it wouldn't allow 2.0 because minor is the middle digit, right? This one wouldn't allow 1.1, but it would allow 1.0.5, etc. So it's sort of a way to let yourself automatically get updated a little bit. What I'll actually say is, in general, it's probably not a good idea for most people to support that, because this is all sort of going off somebody else saying that I didn't break anything in my update. No, trust me, the updated version of my package is compatible and doesn't break stuff. But a lot of times they still do. And so you can get burned if you do that, where you were working and suddenly your code isn't working and you're like, what happened? And it's not clear what happened. And it's because you got an updated version of a dependency that is broken, even though it said, oh, I'm not really breaking anything. So a lot of time, like if I'm specifying them, I don't put any of that in mine. I explicitly say the exact version I want, because I don't want to have that sort of accidental breakage occur. But yeah, so if we're looking at this, this is huge. Look at that. This React app pulled in hundreds of packages. And so now you begin to get a little bit of an idea of how much we're leveraging by using a package manager. We're getting all of this stuff without us having to do anything but call that create React app tool and get all these different things. Now, not all of those packages are being used on the front end. Some of those are being used in our build process and some of that stuff, which we'll dive into more over time, but not too deep today. So then we have one other section in this package.json file that's really important, and that's this scripts section. And since we've already done something that is related to this, anybody want to take a guess at what this scripts section does?
Those are the commands that you can run in the code.
So these are commands that you can send to npm. So we already ran one of these when we did npm run start or npm start. And if we look, that's telling you run this script, which is actually running React scripts start. And React scripts is part of the whole create React app, so that you don't have to know what's going on behind the scenes. It's like, let me go hide all this complexity of starting something up, right? But we have some other ones we can run here too. So let's give this a go. Let's try npm run build. And run is the way that you tell it, I'm performing one of these script actions as opposed to a different action. And you can give it a shot on your system if you want. You don't have to, but if you do run the build, what you'll see is you now have a build folder. And this build folder could be deployed to a web server directly because it has everything from your app built into it. It took all of the code, all of the JavaScript files, and minified them and uglified them and made it completely unreadable and put them here in this file. And then it took anything else you had, like your CSS, and put them in some files, and your HTML. So this build folder could be directly deployed to a web server and served up in this case, which is awesome. Hey, that's great. You also have test, and we haven't talked about testing at all, and I'm not going to get into it too much because it's just too many topics to cover. It's really useful to know. And typically I'll say it in my job, like testing is, I'm just always running tests against my code. But tests are, look at it just a tiny bit. We've got a file here. Tests are a way of running asserting certain behavior in your code. So saying like, oh, when I call this function with these parameters, I should get back this value, right? And so you can write tests against your code. And the reason you do that is so that you make sure it's doing what you think it should be doing, really. And it sounds silly at first. The first time you encounter testing or test-driven development or anything like that, you're thinking like, well, why don't I just write the code? Why am I gonna write tests like this? Part of it might be because it helps you think about how to write code. It helps you think about what you want the end result of your code to be as opposed to getting stuck in the implementation. But it also helps make sure when you make changes to your code that you don't inadvertently introduce something that is a bug. So. And then ignore this eject. Do not run npm run eject. It'll probably, I don't know if it warns you, but it should warn you, because what that'll do is all the complexity of this is hidden behind React scripts. So at the end of the class today or later, I'm going to run npm run eject to show you all the complexity that's being hidden. But all this React scripts is hiding a bunch of the build complexity, what actually takes place. And eject throws all that in your face. And that's really important if you're working on a big project and you need to customize it, or you can't just use their default setup for some reason. Are there any questions about this so far? This is what?
It's really cool.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here, but it does a lot for you, right? So the rest of today, what I want to do is play around with some packages and sort of give you a feel for some cool things that you can do with packages. Because to me, like, this is where stuff starts getting exciting. Like, I hope people are spending time like, oh man, I want to go find a cool package to do something for me, like really awesome that I don't have to do a lot of work for. So let's go try and dig some up. And while we're at it, we're going to see some more of the details of what's going on with this package stuff. So I've got a large list of some over here that I think are pretty nifty packages, and we might sort of pull them in one at a time and play with them. Let's do this one first, because it's sort of a self-contained little bit. We're going to go pull up this React count up one. You guys can follow along if you want or not. So what I'm going to do, you'll see a lot of documentation that says yarn add instead of npm. Yarn is a competing tool to install and manage your projects for JavaScript code. We're going to stick with npm in our class, but yarn is a perfectly viable solution too. So I'm gonna be super lazy. I don't even want to type this out, so I'm just going to copy and paste this. npm install react count up -- save. Anyone want to guess what -- save does? Here, I'm going to run it without it.
I would say,
And then I'm going to run it with it. And we'll see if I'm going to install React count up. Might take a little while. All right. Oh, dang it. I forgot the newer version of npm does this automatically. So you don't actually need to do save with the version of npm we have. What -- save does is it guarantees that it saves it into this package JSON file. And that's so that if you run npm install again later, it'll get reinstalled. Because if it's not in this file and then you run npm install, this is all it uses to install dependencies. So you can install stuff into your node modules folder that doesn't get set in your package JSON. The only problem is you won't be able to get those packages back easily if you recreate your project somewhere else on a different computer or something else. So we can see it added it in here. So I didn't even need the -- save. That's because the newer versions of npm don't need it by default. And like I said, I usually don't like to have these deltas. So I got rid of the little up arrow. And now let's go back and look at the documentation for this. I'm gonna move this over so I can work with it. And it shows us how to use it. So it looks like it's pretty simple. We're gonna import it. This is generally how you can get packages. So other packages you can import using this syntax. This will work for anything that comes from NPM that you've installed with it. And then later we'll talk about how to reference your own packages as well or your own files, which is really simple. It's just to use import as well. You just point to stuff a little differently. So I'm gonna go in my app.js here, and I'm just gonna go ahead and, oops, it's not what I want. I'm gonna import countup from react-countup. And just so you can see, if we went over and looked at our like node modules here, right? Here's our React countup, oops. React countup
You have to add it there.
package right there. What?
You have to add the import.
You have to add the import. And that's so that you have a way to reference it, because it needs to know it needs it in this file, right?
Cool.
So I'm gonna import this, and then I'm gonna go back to my documentation and see what they have here. So I just want to have a countup
Okay, I can't see.
element. Except I'm probably gonna add a duration beyond what they have here.
Oh, close it.
So I'm gonna straight up copy this little count up, oops, go away. Count up bit and put it into my app here. And I'm gonna open another terminal here so that I can leave one of these running all the time. Just gonna leave npm start running over here so that I have my app running. All right, so I should be running now. Did I save my file? I didn't save my file, so let's save this. You notice I didn't have to do anything complex because this npm start is going to automatically recompile our code into something that the browser can understand every time I save it if I'm running start. And it's even going to update refresh the browser. It's called hot reloading. It's going to try as best as it can. It won't always be able to. Sometimes you may have to refresh it manually, but it's going to try to automatically put that code into the running server so that you can see it changing without you having to do refreshes or anything else. So this makes for a really awesome development cycle, right? Like I can go in here and say, oh, I don't want this paragraph anymore. I don't need this intro. Let me delete it. And go over here, and it's gone. I didn't have to do anything else. I just put it at the bottom down here.
Can I see it?
Yeah, just a moment. I just put it in like the right inside of my div.
I can't. Sorry, is that what's next? Is that an equal sign? Equal sign?
Let's try to make stuff a little larger.
Thank you, sorry, I forgot
No, you're good.
I'm gonna get there. But that's in the same file.
I mean, we could put it somewhere else, and we probably will over the course of like today, play with some of that. But I'm just trying to get people used to being able to pull in and leverage something. So everything I'm showing today is our React packages that I'm pulling from NPM, but NPM is in no way dedicated to React packages. That's just a small subset of the packages that live on there. It's just much easier for me to show you React packages. Plus, I want to show more React code. So let's see what happens if I try this. This is just me being really lazy. I'm just stealing their They're examples straight up. So I'm going to try their much more complex one. And I've got this yelling at me, oh, I don't have an on complete or an on start method, so I'm going to get rid of those. And then let's see what this looks like now. I think it's saying euro, like currency. But this is just a lot more. Each one of these is just, what are these? What are each one of these? Attributes or props, right? They're just props that we're passing into the count up component. So we've done some with like maybe 2 props on it, right? We've done very simple ones. This guy has like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different props, like 14, I think that it supports. So we can go over and look at the documentation and they'll document what each prop is and what it supports and what you can do with it. But I think that's pretty cool. We didn't have to do any work to do this, any real complex work in order to have this count up stuff happen, right? It counted for us without us just sort of pulling in this bit of code and dropping it right into our project. Are there any questions about that? No?
I just need to get in there.
Right. And I'm really encourage people to play around with stuff like this, right? Dive in and play around because this is where you're going to start having a lot of fun being able to leverage other people's code. All right, so if we played with that, now let's go on to something a little more complex. They may require some more work from us too, but let's do some that don't require that much work. Let's do something that's really cool, complex, but should be pretty simple for us. I'm going to install this React Markdown editor. So let's try this out. First, I'm just gonna go ahead and get rid of the count up. I don't care about it anymore. I don't want it in my code. So let me remove that and step over here and npm install React Markdown editor, and let's see what happens. All right, so this has gone ahead and you can see it sort of telling you what's going on, and it may even give you warnings. Usually those aren't a big concern. You might take a look at them. This is a pretty old project, so there's the possibility that this isn't going to work directly the way I'm going to try and use it, but we'll see. So I'm going to try and I'm going to straight up borrow this. And what you'll notice here on their documentation is they've got some different syntax. Don't worry about this different syntax. This is an older way to require stuff. And this is an older way to create React classes. So I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to import it using the newer version instead. So I think this should work. We'll find out. Import Markdown editor from, and then what was my package called? React Markdown editor, I believe. Yep. So I think this is going to work. I could be wrong. We'll find out. And then I'm going to just put my Markdown editor right here, and let's see what happens. And we blew up. It's okay.
Wow.
I think I know why. It's because this was actually a named import, and we'll get into some of this more, but there's 2 ways to import stuff. There's the default and named. So I think it's because it was a default or a named import, but I could be wrong. All right, I might be wrong here. Let me see. Cannot read property string of undefined. Like I said, I'm doing this live, so stuff may go wrong.
Does it work without that line with the markdown? It's with just the import?
Yeah, that's a good thing to try next. Because that should help us figure out if the import is what's making us blow up, or if it's it being used in the app is what's making it blow up. I think it is the import. So let's see. React Markdown Editor. The syntax should work. Did I spell it right? Looks like it. It's not blowing up right there. So it's getting access to that code, but this code is blowing up and not working. So I'm guessing that it's incompatible.
Or something, yeah, maybe.
I'm guessing that it's incompatible with our version of React in some way, right? And this is something that you'll run across when you're working with packages. I'm trying not to give you guys a golden path here, right? I'm trying to do some of this stuff live.
Happens with the gym sometimes, I want to install something that is for an older version.
Yep. So I'm trying to show you exactly what's going to happen when you're working with things. You're like, oh man, I found this awesome component. I'm just going to drop it right in, and it might not work. Yep, womp womp. So it looks like that just didn't work. I'm going to ignore this one and move on to another one. It's similar, so we'll see how this goes instead. I'm going to try this React code mirror. Just keep showing what I think are sort of cool examples of stuff. So React-code mirror. While I'm on it, I'll go ahead and step over here and start working with it. So one thing I'm going to do in this example is I'm going to create a separate class. Normally you would put this in a separate file. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do, and don't worry too much about what that means, but I'm just going to go ahead and create another file right here in source. No, stop that. So add a new file, and I'm just going to call it code mirror.js. And because I'm a proper lazy developer, and I don't want to type stuff out that I don't need to, I'm going to, even though it's not going to be that, I'm going to go ahead and start with all that and delete the stuff I know I don't want at all, like this. But I know I need a React component, and we're going to name ours, oh, we can't call it that. I'll call it editor. And then this is how stuff gets imported or exported so that it's usable somewhere else. I'm going to export, and in this case, I'm going to call it my default, and then say what I'm exporting, which is the editor class. So this component, whatever this component is I'm making, is going to get exported out of here. And again, don't worry too much about this. We'll talk about this in more detail another time as well. But in order for me to use that then, I'm going to step over into my app.js, and I'm going to import this. And like I said, import is a little different when you're doing it for something local. But import editor from And the difference is if it's your own file, you need to use a file path type reference. So I'll say this same folder that hence the / editor. I can even say .js to be clear, editor. So import editor from editor. Now right now, all I'm doing in there is duplicating the same thing as my app. So if I rendered it into this, what we should see, where did, oh, because I called it CodeMirror, didn't I? Let me rename this file. So I'll call that editor. Let's see if that fixed it. Oh, it's telling us I'm going to delete this image line because I didn't have a, and now it's telling me the logo doesn't exist. Where's logo referenced? Oh, I didn't want to delete the image in this. I want to delete it in my editor. Sorry. Delete it in the editor file. There we go. So now if we look, well, we've got a sort of double nested thing because we're just putting the second one inside of itself. Now we could change this. So let's instead make this like div editor div. And if we go look, we can see we got our app.js, which renders everything, and then it renders the editor component, which is just this bit of text right now, a div with that little bit of text, right? But in the meantime, we've installed this React CodeMirror project, and I want to leverage that. So I'm going to step over here and start using this as a reference. So this will get interesting. We've got a few things to do. The first thing will be importing CodeMirror into our, let me step into this editor file. Import CodeMirror from React CodeMirror. And then I want to leverage that. So let me go and look at this reference again. And here's a sort of an example, but we don't yet have all of this in place. I'm going to take it and then modify it, and we'll build it back up to where we're at. So let's say on change, I don't have anything right now. And options, I don't have anything. And for my value, what was his starting value? Yeah, I'm just going to have the string directly in there right now. Value equals / code. All right, let's look over here. It looks like it's building. Let's see what happens. Hey, I've got a little, it's showing code. Weird X thing showing up there, but some stuff isn't going on. So let's try and troubleshoot what could be wrong here, right? The next thing it mentioned that I skipped over already was include the CSS. Well, that's probably part of our problem.
And you, in the app.js, did you follow the editor?
I called the editor, yep. Over in app.js, I imported editor from it, and then here is where I put it into my markup. My JSX is right here at the bottom. So let's step over here and let's say, all right, well, it gives me some hints. If you're using Webpack with the CSS loader, you can require the CodeMirror CSS in your application instead. Well, that's not what we're using. I don't know how to get the CSS, except secret is, yes, we are. Like, Create React App uses Webpack and the CSS loader underneath, but we're not going to use this syntax again because I prefer to stick with the newer syntax. So if we look here, here's an import of a CSS file, right? An example. So we can do the same sort of thing over here where I'm going to, I think this will work, import and I think it's React CodeMirror lib CodeMirror.css. I think this is going to work. We're going to find out. No, it couldn't find it. Maybe, no, it can't find this. So maybe it did. Let's go over here and look at our packages because it told us to import it from CodeMirror, right? So maybe it installed the CodeMirror package directly. Sure looks like it. So I probably should have not had the React dash. Let's try and import right here. See what we get. Oh, that's looking good. So now, well, it's looking better. I can at least put my cursor in here and actually work with it now, right? What can I do? I don't know. Like, I've got, CodeMirror is a in-browser code editor. So I have a little code editor right here in my browser right now that I started with this value. Now we can start looking at what, like, there are a lot of properties I can set on this guy, including a lot of options to pass into CodeMirror itself. And one of those is the mode. So I'm gonna go ahead and set the mode to JavaScript.
Derek, can you go over what you changed?
Yeah. Just
What's this?
1 second. Let me get this here. And then you want to know what I changed where?
Yeah, what you, like, how you got it to work? Like,
Oh, with the CodeMirror.css.
Oh, you added.
So what I did is, yeah, they had the documentation up here that said require CodeMirror lib CodeMirror.css, and this line would work just fine. But I prefer, so I don't want to get into too much detail on this, but JavaScript has had a few different, before it had a built-in module format, there were some ones that were libraries that supported modules. That's what this require syntax is one of the older module formats. And now import and export is the like built into JavaScript way to require stuff. So Webpack that we're using to build stuff can convert from one to the other. It's smart enough to know what they are. So we could write it either way. And so I just prefer to write import, like this import syntax instead of require. But you can, this is the exact same string, right? So I'm using the same thing that he had. I could have written it the other way too, and it would have been just fine. That should work. Oh, it's got a problem with my, with that, not with my line up above. So I could write it that way, but I prefer to use the newer ES6 import syntax myself. So I just converted it because I knew that I could do that. That's one of some of the confusing bits about JavaScript, unfortunately, is they didn't have some of that stuff built into the language early on, which means that there's several competing ways to do things. And you end up having to get used to reading between the lines on all of them, like, oh, this is the same as that. So I added this option JavaScript. I don't know what this does. Let's see what this does. I assume this means I can write some sort of JavaScript code now, and it might know something about it. Var, I mean, it's sort of cool. I think there's a lot more I could probably define on my, oh, it looks like I need to require the JavaScript, require this language mode. That's maybe why I'm not getting everything I need, right? So I'm going to go ahead and import that too. Again, I'm just going to use the import syntax, but it's pretty much the same thing. So you'll see me convert it over. This is me, again, I'm doing this live. I'm reading this documentation, sort of going along with you guys. So I don't exactly, oh, now we're getting something cool. Look at that. imported that in, and now we've got some syntax highlighting right there in this little package that we brought in. And we haven't had to write very much to get that. It required a little bit of reading and documentation, some getting some things set up, going through some of it and figuring out what we want, but it's pretty impressive in terms of what we could get. And there's a lot more, like if we go here and let's look at the like the live demo, you know, we could add a lot more in there too. So like let's add another thing to our options, because in the original version of the options up here, it had line numbers true. So let's add that. To our options and see what it does. Oh. Did I have something wrong? Maybe it just doesn't show them after all. What's that? Oh, it is showing line numbers. It's just way over here. This whole thing is the editor. I didn't confine it to a set space. So see, my editor is really wide. But heck, I think that's pretty cool. So we play with that. Let's go with another one. What time is it? I don't want to go too much longer. Actually, I think I might stop. But here's a really cool one that would require a little bit more work from us, right? This is a timeline. So this is let's look at an example of it right here, a demo. This lets you create this sort of vertical timeline in a page, popping stuff in like this if you want. And it's not that bad. If we go look at the work here, basically all it is a couple components. You've got a vertical timeline and a vertical timeline element. And so your vertical timeline is the parent of everything. And then you create vertical timeline elements that contain the individual content that you want. And then inside of there, looks like you can pretty much just render whatever you want to render. And just create a timeline that way. And then some awesome, properties you can play around with here. So I guess what I'm getting at here is like, this is always a really tough topic to present, is starting to introduce people to packages and this huge environment of other code that you can pull in and use, right? But what I want to do is not do it just from a small, like, oh, you can pull in little utility functions like left pad, which you can do. You can pull in all sorts of little things. Like you probably, I wasn't in your class, but I'll bet you that you guys did something like a Caesar cipher or a Pig Latin project in your last class. Did you do Pig Latin or Caesar cipher or anything like that? Yeah, Caesar cipher, Pig Latin, one or the other. Pig Latin. So here we go. Pig Latinizer. That's right. You can just go grab this and use this. And instead of having to write your own Pig Latin tool, you could just go grab a package and have it, boom, somebody else has already put it out there. I love how the keywords is IGPay, Attenlay, Aikenbay. Those are good keywords. So this is a big space, right? And really all I can do is touch on it, but I want to get you starting to be comfortable with it. The key part here is we're going to start using this a little bit because Create React App gets installed or is used through NPM. And from there, we're going to start adding in packages as we build out our apps going forward. And we're also going to start importing our own files from stuff. So that's really the gist, is to start playing around, start looking into this. and start understanding just how big this universe is in terms of what's accessible to you and what you can pull in for packages. Like you might do searches for like popular NPM packages, you know, the best utility packages, things like that. Because there's just absolutely tons of them out there to leverage in your code. Any questions about that so far? I know it's a lot in terms of topics, and it's going to be something that, you know, you keep struggling with at some level, but all right then. I'm going to a couple last things and then get out of here hopefully a little early or something. First, what I want to do is I'm going to, let me see here. Which one of these do I like? I like this one more, I think. So I had no, it was definitely this one where there's just tons all in one place. Yeah, here we go. Can I jump to this section? I can. There we go. So I'm going to post this as a link. And what I would love to see people do is I want everybody to be ready to just quickly touch on one of them, like describe it, or if you tried to pull it in, talk about what you did with it. If it's, you know, I suggest if you're going to try and build something with it or do something with one of them, find a really small, simple package, because some of them are huge and I don't want you to be overwhelmed yet. But yeah, give it a go. And then the other thing I wanted to show you, just to show you sort of what's hiding behind the scenes here, is because I can blow all this away and start from scratch again, is I'm going to do this npm eject, which is going to take a little while, but npm run, remember that's what you have to do for anything in that scripts folder. There's a couple that you don't, but it's best to just always do npm run so that you don't forget. You can also, if you just type npm run, by the way, it will list the scripts that are available to you without you having to open that file. So here it says start, test, build, and eject. So it's got them listed right there. Anything that you have in that scripts. So I'm going to run eject just to sort of show you what's being hidden behind the scenes. Are you sure you want to eject this app? Yep, let's do it. And you can already begin to see a whole bunch of other crud sort of pop up in here. And it's npm installing a lot of things. And we've ejected. So if we jump up here, it says configuring package.json. Now let's look at our package.json. Whoo! That just got a lot more complicated than before, right? That React scripts bit was hiding all of that. And so there's a lot of dependencies in here. Each one of these you could go search up and look at and try and understand what's going on. So some of these are used during the build, and some of these are used on the front end. Babel, anybody remember what Babel does for us?
Translate.
Yeah?
Yeah, isn't it JSX?
It's, yep, it's JSX or ES6. Any of the newer JavaScript that a browser can't support, it'll convert it to JavaScript that a browser supports. So you remember, we can go to the Babel. All right, I'm gonna have to search it up. Oh, they have the, like the try it out page, right? Like right here. And it's converting from this to this. So Babel is used on the build side when we're running that to like npm build or npm run build or npm start. It's running our code through Babel and converting it to something the browser can understand. a lot of these are used over on the build side. The CSS loader is all part of something called Webpack that's being used to build up your application. But then some of these are things that are on the front end side and are used inside of your application. React DOM, React CodeMirror, React CountUp, some of those things. So here's all the other bits that got added. Like this is what happened when I ejected. Here's all this Jest stuff. You could easily go check out what Jest is, but Jest is what we're using for testing our code. What?
It still has the fruit list that I put in from the class we did before.
Still has the fruit list?
Remember we did, like, everyone was naming the fruit.
Oh, yeah.
And then we made like a list. I opened up Apple and did try out, and it still has it.
Ah, yeah.
So weird.
Yep. Well, it still had my stuff here. Why does it have it? I'll tell you why. It's because it's saving it in local storage in your browser. So as long as you opened it in the same browser, it can restore that state, which is really cool. Let's look at some of the other stuff that happened when I ejected. We added this config folder. And we've got these Webpack config files. Don't worry about the details of this right now, but this is what's actually being used to figure out how to build your code. That's some ugly, ugly stuff. Hopefully you don't need to worry about that for quite a while. I'll say this, I'm the only person on my team, and I've got a lot of people who do a lot of coding who ever really gets into this because nobody wants to touch this file when we have to go in there and change it, because it's ugly. And then this one is for development, and this one's for production. So when we ran npm start and it was refreshing stuff in the background, it was using this dev file, but when we ran npm run build, it's using this production one instead. And then they've got all these other utility scripts to help them find like environment variables, do some polyfill stuff, etc. It also created this scripts folder. Here's yet some more scripts that they've got to help them out. What? Where's the eject? It's not going to show up here because there's no reason to put it in here, because ejecting put all this stuff in there instead. Right? So yeah, but here's where the start is, right? So if we looked at our package.json now, you see the script has changed now. We don't have eject anymore. It's gone because we can't re-eject. It told us it was a one-way operation. Can't exactly put the pilot back in the jet when he's pulled like the ejection seat. He's out. There's no way he's going back in. But now our start isn't calling React scripts, it's calling Node scripts/start.js. So it's using Node to call this file. And if you want to, you can go in there and start looking at that. Feel free, but I'll bet you would have tons of questions. Again, I don't recommend you eject your stuff because there's no reason to be doing that at this point in your code. I just wanted you to see what's going on behind the scenes when you're using this Create React app to spin stuff up. And there's a lot of weird complexity going on back there. But yeah, I mean, so my goal here is get excited about NPM, get excited about this environment, this ecosystem of stuff out there for you to pull in, whether it's a tiny little utility that you don't want to have to write, or it's this full-featured in-browser code editor that you can just drop into some website that you're building and have a code editor right there. Or whether it's something that lets you lay out your web page, or it's all sorts of stuff. Let's search for like there's music things, search and control, like you can add some music, and some of this stuff is for backend. A lot of this, because npm is really for any JavaScript packages, and Node can run on your server, not just in a browser. You'll see a lot of stuff like that. But so let me see here. Let me see like browser music or something. Streaming music metadata. Browser side JavaScript library for controlling Google Music. So you can build something for that. A web audio framework for making interactive music in the browser. Tone.js. We can go look at examples, and here's stuff that's been built with it, like learning music. I mean, obviously there's a lot going on here, but you can start building things out by just pulling some of these packages from people, right? Or maybe you want to put an Easter egg into your program, right? And you're like, here's easily add Easter eggs to your React app, a way to add them or something, with some keyboard shortcuts, and to say, oh, when you type these keyboard things in, you'll get something special. Or here's a make the Mortal Kombat toasty guy pop out of your site, right? You can go pull this up and add it to your page, and a little bit of JavaScript, and bam, have a little guy pop up and do something, right? Yeah, we're gonna skip over that one.
That one's
But I mean, there's all sorts of, you know, if you search, like if we did React music, right? Maybe there'd be some music stuff for React. Oh, here's a React music player, MIDI sounds in React, React responsive music player. I don't know if this is a package here. Let me see if this is. Probably not, but yeah, somebody built a little Winamp thing in JavaScript. If anybody ever used Winamp, I'm dating myself by talking about this. So, you know, what? Winamp, it really whips the llama's ass. We were just joking about that today at work, but there are tons of things you can go fetch out of here and start using in your app. And I hope that gets you excited, thinking like, oh man, I don't have to build all this from scratch. Yeah, there's a lot of complexity in building out websites or in building out code, but there's also a lot of really cool stuff that you can just go grab and use and try and put into your site and have a fun time with, right? So that's the goal here, is you want to have fun while you're coding, because it's going to help keep you engaged. Go look up libraries for making video games. There might even be some like ways to have games embedded right in it in some of these package managers. Check it out, play with it. All right, next class we'll pick back up with React, and we'll talk about lifecycle events on React components, which will be building on top of the state management that we did. And once we have all of that in place, then anything else for the most part that we talk about through the remaining classes, I hope for us to be building on a project, probably the stopwatch/timer type project. And so we'll start building something out bit by bit going forward on that. So, and what we'll do with that is probably everyone will work inside of Cloud9, hopefully, if that works for everyone, so that we all sort of have a common environment to work out of. And after each class, I'll probably update like a GitHub repository with the latest version of the code. So if somebody feels like they were stuck and they don't know where to go, they can hopefully just pull that down and start fresh at the same point we're all at, so nobody gets behind and can't keep up with us.